Hello and welcome to Jill Cameron Creations. Thanks for joining me today. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single video. Today we're going to be using pattern paper to make our Christmas cards. I know you have tons of pattern paper in your stash. Well, we're going to use some of that today. I'm going to give you a bunch of different ideas on how to use a bunch of different dies and a bunch of different pattern papers and create a multitude of all different looking Christmas cards. This is a way to mass produce quickly different Christmas cards, but at the same time they're still mass production because you're using pattern papers, so it goes really quick. Now, I just pulled out a bunch of dies and borders and rectangles and that kind of thing because I'm making a bunch of different cards. You can use the same one over and over with a bunch of different pattern papers and still get different looks for your cards. Or you can do what I'm doing here, which is making a bunch of different cards with a bunch of different patterned papers and get different looks, but these are still going to go really quickly because they are patterned papers. So I have a pack of glitter cardstock. Glitter cardstock is not the easiest thing to die cut sometimes. Sometimes you'll have to run it through your die cut machine several times and to get a good clean cut. Just keep that in mind when you're running your glitter paper through your die cutting machine, and be patient with it, especially with something that's as intricate as this is. I did die cut a separate piece in just plain white to back this with, just to give it a little bit more stability as well. I kept the colors for these two cards really fun and light to correspond, of course, with the pattern papers. And this also kind of goes back to our first video that we did for our Christmas in July series, where I did a little bit alternate colors and stamps. If you haven't seen that, you head over to the blog and it links back to that first video that I did. Also, I have yesterday's video, which is where I created a SVG file too. You can head over and see that, and it's a big Mary for slimline cards as well as A2 size cards, and that you can use for your Christmas cards. It's fantastic. Okay, sorry for the weird voice. All right, so I have a habit of when I put my paper in, I cut it the same way every time. I start at 5 1/2 and go 4 1/4, and then I realized, oh, this has words on it. I need to cut it a specific way, so then I had to cut it twice. Oops. So we're going to glue this straight down to our card panel, and then we're going to add our frame on here. This frame in particular is from Paper Tray Ink. It is part of their Border Bling series. It has like little lines in the inside between the border, the outside and inside border of the frame. It adds a lot of detail to it. It's really cute. And I'm going to go ahead and add that down, straight down to it. I didn't add a whole lot of foam tape or anything to any of this. And then I'm going to add the sentiment straight down on top of that, and that's our card. Of course, if you want to add foam tape to any of this, if you want to add jewels or Nouveau drops or stamping or anything like that to add more to these cards, you definitely can. But having that pattern paper kind of alleviates you from having to add a lot of stuff to these cards, and makes having pattern paper for your Christmas cards to make them very easy to reproduce over and over and over, or have a bunch of different cards that look very different. I know a lot of us hang on to our patterned paper because we don't want to run out of it, and it's so pretty and we just don't want to run out of it, but it's meant to be used. Go clean out some of that pattern paper that you have and make beautiful cards with it. Share it. Show it some love in some other homes somewhere else. Use it. We have this really bold pattern on here that has lots of color to it, but it still needs to pop, and I'm using the light blue to go with that pattern, so I'm going to use black as that contrasting color to make all the other colors really pop on here. Don't be afraid to use a super dark color with these bright colors. Go ahead and use that really dark color, and it could be a really dark red, a really dark green, a really dark black. Well, black paper is really dark, but that's beside the point. We could use any dark color that we wanted to here. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that out. I'm going to use a Wonky stitched rectangle die and cut that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut out my sentiment for this, and it's Merry Christmas. The Merry cuts out individual letters and the Christmas is in that script. I'm also going to cut this out in black, and I'm going to layer those letters together so that the Merry and the Christmas looks like it has a shadow behind it. And all you have to do is act like you're going to stack those up, but instead you actually just offset it just slightly. And this is how I actually take out most of my word dies and that kind of thing, is just slightly just take my pokey tool and just poke them on out. I'm going to show you really quickly how I do Christmas, and then you're not going to have to sit through me stacking the rest of these up. I just wanted you to see how I do this for one, and Christmas is the easiest one here. A little bit of glue on the back side of this, and we're just going to center it up like we normally do. If you've never stacked a sentiment or a letter or anything before, start in the middle, and then you're going to work your way out. It's easiest to start in the middle and work your way out. And then that T was a little bit cumbersome, but that's okay. And I slid it off just a little bit to the side, and that was it. Now I'm going to glue everything down. I'm going to start with my Christmas sentiment because I want that to be kind of a little bit below center, and then we're going to do Merry, and I wanted to make sure that my Merry was going to fit where I wanted it to on there. So I'm going to place it dry first, and then I'm going to fit everything on there from the center out to the sides. If you are using individual letter dies, don't start at the side, start in the center and then work your way out, because then you'll be able to actually place your letters where you need to, and you'll have room on both sides. You're not going to run out of room that way. I'm actually using the ornaments on the card, on the patterned paper itself, as my alignment. Instead of drawing a line, I'm just using the ornaments on there because they are in a straight line on the paper already. So that was already a pre-designed line there for me. Just easy pop those on there, and we'll get that card finished up. Next, we're going to be using some more traditional papers, and this is some black background poinsettia paper, and I'm pairing it with some craft colored paper, and I'm going to trim this down, and this is going to be a landscape card. You can use these strips of paper, the leftovers that you have from where you're trimming your papers down, use those on cards too. You can pair those with some solid cardstocks and use these same dies and put that strip on the cardstock, and ta-da, you have a whole nother look using that patterned paper as well. I did not include any of those in this card, in this video, because this was already a really super long video, and I thought I will give those tips as we're going through all of this. So I'm using the pairing from a Concord and 9th die set here, and I'm going to put all of my letters and everything together, and happy holidays, and stack up all of these letters and the sentiment here, and that's how you stack up a letter real easy. And ta-da! All of my letters and sentiments and everything are all stacked up, so I'm going to glue my background for my sentiment all in the center of my card here, and go ahead and glue down my holidays. This is meant to go together. The happy fits into the holidays sentiment. So I'm going to show you a really cool little trick here. I'm going to use the negative of the die cut that we did. I'm just going to fit it over here. I'm not going to like mash it down or anything. It's just loosely sitting there. I'm going to put a little glue on the back of this, and then I'm going to pop that Y in there. I'm not mashing the paper, the negative space down or anything. I'm just popping those pieces in there, and then we'll gently lift the negative space off. And that's how you get perfect placement if you have one of these kinds of dies. That means that they go together kind of thing. I put down the whole piece first, and then use that negative space to fill everything else in. Now I could add, of course, any jewels. I could add glossy accents on top of this. I could add white enamel dots. I could add some pearls to that. Gorgeous card. Or I can leave it as is, as I did. For our next one, I'm going to actually do several different layers for this one and add some red glitter paper. And then I'm going to take that banner die and I'm going to include a little bit of a shadow behind that by die cutting it twice, once out of white and once out of black, and offsetting that black behind the white, and it just gives that die a little bit of extra pop on the front of that card. Absolutely gorgeous. Those are like the little things that you can do to make simple cards such as this, where we're just doing a stack of cardstock paper that has a lot of different layers to it, and I'm just making sure my sizes are appropriate that for what I need them to be, and then just making sure all of my layers fit together how I want them. And then I'm going to pull out some really red glitter paper here. But adding that pop of black behind that banner die is really going to set off that banner and make that Merry Christmas sentiment on the front stand out. And you'll see me where I am pulling out, where I'm showing you what I'm using on the front side. I have scraps of white where I have cut card bases for slimline cards, or I have cut something with my digital die cutting machine, my silhouette and that kind of thing. I have a pile of white scraps sitting beside me, and I keep pulling that apart so I can use those scraps up and throw away the trash. So here I'm actually pulling out a piece of that black, and this is absolutely, this makes so much difference to how this looks, because you can see how this looks. It looks great, but putting that black behind there, just that little bit, man, it makes it pop. And it's those little things that you can do that will just make that card just absolutely gorgeous. And then I'm just going to stamp this on the front. The stamp set is actually the stamps that go with this banner. There's a couple different ones from Concord and 9th. This particular one, sorry, my big old head gets in the way so I can line that up, is on the Turnabout stamp set. And I have that linked below as well. Lines up really easy. Ta-da. And I stamped that in black so it would stand out very obvious. The ink that I'm using is from Maker Forte. It is the Eclipse Black ink, and it is great. It's a really dark black ink, and it is also really great for Copic coloring too. It's kind of has become my all-purpose everything go-to black ink. It is amazing. I have really enjoyed that ink. And I'm going to glue this straight down to this card base. If you're wondering what I'm doing there, I'm flipping that over on the folded edge, and I'm butting the paper up against my cutting mat to make sure that the edge of the paper is straight all the way across. That's one way to get your paper even all the way around, to make sure that it is nice and flush with the top edge of your card. And then I'm just going to layer everything up. And after a while, you get used to and become very proficient at visually being able to center things. That's something that takes a lot of practice to do. If you have trouble with it, nobody's going to notice it's crooked but you. Don't worry about it. There's our finished card for that one. Now we have some black and white stuff. I die cut some sentiments using my silhouette and out of silver cardstock, and I created a background for it as well, and I'm just going to pull those pieces out. And I'm also going to just use some frames from different die sets that I have, and we're going to create just really simple, easy cards here that are super fun, because I love buffalo plaid. I love buffalo plaid, and I'm kind of in love with the black and white thing. Mom, a couple years ago, she found this great big huge pile of solid black wrapping paper, and she bought a ton of it, and she made the prettiest collection of gifts ever, because she put all kinds of, like a rainbow of different tinsel on the packages, and it was absolutely the most gorgeous thing ever. She doesn't decorate for Christmas anymore because it's just her at the house, but the packages, absolutely gorgeous. It was a great big pile of packages sitting there, and they were all wrapped in black paper, but the rainbow of color that was in them was amazing. It was so cool. And as somebody that looks at color all the time because of this, it was just eye-catching to me. So I think I've kind of grown and really like the black and white thing for Christmas cards and that kind of stuff. So I'm using a really dark forest green here. I wanted a little bit more for this card, so I went ahead and I pulled out the die set, and you can see me thinking there for a second. I pulled out the stamp set that goes with that die, which is the fill-in bloom set, and I'm going to actually stamp the edge of it. And I'm also going to trim down this panel just a little bit and pop that black behind there and just give it a little bit of something else. It just needed something else. It just needed a little something else. And these are the decisions that you have to make sometimes when you're figuring out what you want to do. My card base was a little bit off. If you have a funky card base, just trim off the edge of it. Not a problem. So I'm going to put my black on here, and then I'm going to trim down that paper and just a shade, and we're going to have that black peeking out there. I know that looks like a lot of glue on there, but it's not. I promise. It is not a lot of glue. It is not a lot of glue. And make sure that that's down on there really well. And the cardstock that I bought for my card base is 110 pound heavyweight cardstock. It was not the squarest cardstock I've ever purchased. It's really great for card bases. It's really heavy and really nice, but it's just not the squarest in the world. But that's okay. I can make it work. I can trim it up. Not a problem. So now we're going to trim this down, and then I'm going to stamp the coordinating stamp that goes with this. It's an outline and a little arrow here, and I'm going to emboss that in white embossing powder. Don't forget your anti-static powder tool so that embossing powder doesn't get stuck in places that it shouldn't. And I'm using a really fine milled embossing powder. If you have a chunky white embossing powder, you're not going to get as smooth. And when you buy a cheap embossing powder, that's what you're going to get, is something that's just not milled as fine. I like detail white embossing powders. They are beautiful white. They give really great results. They don't do a lot of stray. It doesn't look bumpy. It smooths out and gives a really great white detail, and that's why it's called detail white embossing powder. Okay, so now that I have finished rambling on, sorry about that. No, I'm not. I like rambling. I like rambling. And I'm going to go ahead and trim down this panel finally, I think. Yes, I'm going to trim down the panel finally. Yes! There we go. I take 1/4 of an inch off of the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to mount that onto our black background here, and then I'm going to center mount our little shape, and then I'm going to put our Happy Holidays in the middle there. I'm also going to do the same thing very similar to that on the buffalo plaid, but I'm not going to mount the buffalo plaid on a black background. It's just going to be buffalo plaid because I love buffalo plaid. I like the name buffalo plaid. I could say buffalo plaid 10 more times and still be happy about it, but I won't bore y'all with that. Okay, a little bit of glue on the back of this, and it's all done. Another thing, if y'all notice that for my die cuts, a lot of the die cut sentiments are hanging off of the edge or outside of the border of whatever I'm working on. That's also going to complete your look a little bit more. It's kind of the same thing of if you are making a background out of tiny stamps. You want it to be off, you want to stamp off of your page edge so that it looks more complete instead of everything being on the inside of it. Just keep that in mind as well while you're working on your cards. Put your sentiments outside of that border if you have like a border or something that you're working with. For this one, I don't. I actually keep it all on the inside of my border because this is a little bit more right justified. and I liked the look of this more centered. That was just, it doesn't have to be. It's just the way I liked this one a little bit. My fingers were so sticky by the time I finished making all these cards. It took me probably about 10 minutes to finally get all of the glue off of my fingers with some really hot water and a loofah sponge to get everything off. And that's why you keep seeing me rub my fingers together, is because I'm getting all the glue off the very end of my finger. And I had to get my pickup stick thingy so I could get my dot for the eye, and it wouldn't turn over, so I couldn't. I had the hardest time with that. It didn't want to turn over. But that's why you keep seeing me rub my fingers together in my videos a whole lot, is because I have glue on the end of my fingers and I'm trying to get the glue off of it. So we're just going to center this. What would have been really pretty on here is if I'd have had a satin red. That would have been gorgeous. Satin red on here would have been absolutely gorgeous, but I didn't have any satin cardstock. So we're just going to glue this flat down. And for our last card, we are going to take all of the cardstocks and combine them together. And I know that sounds really crazy and creepy and kind of weird, but it's absolutely gorgeous. So let's take a look at that one real quick. Woohoo! So for our last one here, I'm going to use the snowflake background as our background, and then the green and the red, we're going to create frames out of those. And I'm going to stamp a great big sentiment in the middle of it that says Peace on Earth. And we're just going to do frames on that. And that's also how you can use your use up some of that pattern paper. You can create frames for them. And then the inside of these you can use on other cards too. So use up those scraps. Like I said before, you can use those two inside frames on something else. This particular paper is like really heavy craft paper, and it is not the easiest stuff in the world to work with. Cutting it actually reminds me of nails on a chalkboard, and it was anyway. It's some old craft paper I had, so I decided I would use it. Get rid of some of it. Use it up. Pull out some of that patterned paper and see what you can come up with. Some dies and some patterned paper, and make some absolutely gorgeous and different Christmas cards. Pull them out. Get the kids involved. It'll be fun. Come up with some different ideas that you can do for your Christmas cards, and use up some of that stash that you have there. Don't forget to head over to the blog, and I will have some different layouts over there, and also some different tips for using up those scraps that we have left over for our cards that we've created from making these. And we'll also have I'll have links back to the first two posts for our Christmas in July as well. Pictures of all the cards are at the end of the video. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow. Have a great day.